Grab a cup of joe and let's gather round that hay bale. With your hosts, Ann from Andale Homestead, Cayce from Ormsby Farms, Monica from Bland's Promised Land Ranch, and Sandi from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. Here they are. Hey, y'all, hey.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann with Andale Homestead.
Hey, everyone. It is Cayce over at Ormsby Farms.
I'm Monica at Bland's Promised Land Ranch.
And this is Sandi with Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming, Arizona. And it is part 2. That's right. We're talking about the cost of running a homestead, money and more, because we want to spread that part out. But we're literally going to dive deep today. And we're going to talk about gardening and trees and how to break it down on every cost that you might have. So if you're listening to us and you would like to see our smiling faces, you can always go over to YouTube, Round the Hay Bale, and you can see our podcast on YouTube, which is sometimes much more fun. But we were talking about how we get a return on our investment for every part of our garden, because we have to put some money out and we're going to break it down, and how are we going to return on that investment? So, Ann, you're a gardener.
I am a gardener. And our return was a little it was a little low the first garden that we had, but then we got the hang of it, and we had our fruits and vegetables and things, and we began to learn. I had never even had a fall garden before, and learned to plant fall and cooler weather crops, and to be able to weigh the difference in what I would spend at the grocery store, and to know that I have it already in my home under glass, they may say, then that was, it's an amazing, wonderful feeling. It's emotional for me, really. It's emotional. But we do have to think about that, because there are some expenses to starting up. Now, our first year, we had some old wood pieces that we made a little square out of. We found some old pieces we had in the past. We borrowed the neighbor's tiller, because we're tillers. Not everybody is, but we borrowed the neighbor's tiller. We got our soil from our cotton gin, and that was free. So really, our gardening expense was just mostly seeds, and I had already been gathering those seeds, so that worked out well. How about you, Monica, as far as expenses and trying to weigh the difference? What if they were just starting, what could someone expect as far as upfront expense possibly that might pay off in the long run?
So, I mean, I guess it depends on what type of space they have, right? So when you're first starting a garden, you need to think about the space that you have. Do you need to buy garden beds, or do you need to, have garden beds to garden in your space? Do you want to just put it in the ground? What are you doing that way? So first, take a look at your spacing and your needs on whether you're going to need to purchase raised garden beds, whether you can build raised garden beds, or whether you can just plant right there in the ground. I think that's important to think about right off the bat, right? What is your space requirement? Are you going to plant only in, different planting containers? What was that saying your friend had, Miss Ann, about if you have a container, you have a place to plant or something?
Pam.
It was Pam, the scaredy cat gardener.
Oh, anywhere you can place a pot, you can grow a plant.
There you go. Anywhere you can place a pot, you can grow a plant. So it depends on what your space is, right? I mean, I think that's really where you should start, is what kind of space do you have? I mean, I guess that's after you make your list of what you want to grow, right? Or what you're thinking your needs are as a family size or family or whatever. But look at what you have. I mean, that's really where you're going to make your initial investment, is your space to grow, right? Whether you're going to put it in the ground, whether you're going to put it in pots or planting spaces, whatever that is, that's your very first I think that's where you really need to start, right? And so sometimes you get these beautiful Vigo garden beds, which all of us have, or sometimes you have homemade garden beds. We have made raised garden beds before out of pallet wood,
Yeah.
recycled materials, things that used to be maybe an old shed or an old space. We turned it into something useful and made it a space to grow. You can do all kinds of stuff. And I think that's where really you kind of look at your space and how you're going to start that way. That's for me, that's kind of where I would start. Sandy, am I getting off to the right track? What are you thinking on this? I mean, really, I think that's kind of where you need to start, right? Looking at your space. And if you're going to break it down, go there first.
Okay, so you're a homesteader. You decided you wanted to do a garden.
Yeah.
Now, some homesteaders have a lot of acres, but how much can you really work too? What kind of things will your family eat? Raised beds in the ground, hydroponics. You got to look at all the different ways. Like I have these great big buckets, and we have a lot of cattlemen in Wyoming. And I think the ones that I got for free were probably some kind of mineral that the cows needed. They come in different colors. Mine
They're
are
protein
orange.
tubs. They're protein
Yeah.
tubs. Yeah.
Well, ranchers use them, and they can only use so many when they're empty. They donate them. All of us master gardeners got them, and so that was a free place that I could plant plants in.
Yep.
You know, if you're going to have raised beds, are you going to fill it all with soil? That's a big expense. Can you put wood and logs? And I've seen people put pop cans in the bottom of a raised bed. You know, they've used styrofoam in the bottom of a raised bed, so they didn't have to put quite so much soil in there, because that is a cost that you have to figure in. If you're buying bags of soil, it adds up fast. What can you afford? Do you have to buy hoses? Do you need nozzles? Do you need what can you put in each one of those raised beds to make it a little more economical? Now, Cayce, you just moved to a new homestead. And so you're deciding on your garden space right now.
I am.
So tell us what you're thinking.
Well, for anybody that follows me, I had a 3,000 square foot in-ground garden at my previous homestead. And I, like Miss Ann, was a tiller. I'm a pro tiller.
Yeah.
Now, at the new homestead, we went from 10 acres to 1 acre. And you can still have a wonderful garden at 1 acre. I think we've talked, and Sandi has said she's on a third of an acre.
Yeah.
I live on 1 acre.
You have to just map it out in your head. Again, as Sandi said, what does my family eat? Now, do I like growing all of those fun, crazy noodle beans or this bean or that? Yeah, but I have to think, what do I go through the most? Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini squash. Those are our 3 must-haves. So then you have that written down. Now you got to figure out how much space you need. How many plants of that, and how much space do you need for that plant or for that group of plants? Doing the square gardening method, where you know how many plates, I can't speak tonight, y'all, how many plants you want in a certain area. And then you got to look at sun. Southeast is probably the best for your sun. That's what I'm doing right now. As I've talked with Sandi, I'm like, okay, I'm going to test out a couple different areas. I may even FaceTime you and be like, Sandi, what about this area? But you need to know what kind of sun that plant needs. If you're putting it into the ground, is it really dry soil, or does it, when it rains, does it hold that water there? So that's what I'm doing now, is I'm mapping out my little acre, because my fenced in is only a third of an acre. I have 2/3 of wood, which is going to take Jesus and time before that's ready to do anything. But I'm thinking, okay, this is what I want. I know I want tomatoes. I know I want this. Now what do I need to get? I have decided to move to raised beds. So I'm joining the Sandi train on raised beds for now. I'm not saying I'm going away from tilling, but for now, and I'm doing the hugelkultur. It's kind of what you were mentioning. We've had our friend Carmen from Jesus Loving Homesteader on a couple times, and she's a big hugelkulturer.
That sounds right.
And really what you're doing is you're putting logs or sticks or pine cones or pine straw at the very bottom, and you're doing leaves next, and then maybe a soil that you need to amend a little bit, and then the expensive stuff, like Sandy said, because buying bags of soil is not for the faint of heart right now. It is expensive to get the good organic stuff. You're only really doing maybe 4 inches of that, because over time the hugelkultur will compost down, and then you'll have some wonderful, yummy soil underneath. And that's a way to save money for instead of buying 40 bags of the organic potting soil to put in your raised beds, because then you have a $900 raised bed and $1 million tomato plant.
Yeah.
Or you can find people in your area that are maybe farmers or, you know, ranchers or people that have horses, and you ask them what they do with their manure. Ask them if you can take it. And if you start planting early enough, you can take that and compost that down. When we were in Maryland, we did that. We drove an hour north outside of Baltimore in Maryland. We took our little livestock trailer and we went to a horse farm. And this guy was just filling up our little livestock trailer. We had it hooked up to my little Toyota Sienna, like my station wagon.
There you go.
And we hooked that bad boy up and we rolled out and we went and got my van, actually. I think it was my van. And we rolled out and we got ourselves a big old trailer full of poop, of horse poop.
Okay.
And we brought it home and we laid it out and we let that compost and we let that go and we mixed it in with a bunch of dirt and we tilled it into our soil in Maryland. And we had a nice little garden in Maryland at his parents' house on, I believe, 1/3 or 1/4 of an acre. And we had this beautiful garden and we got it for basically nothing. I think we paid anything but the time it took for us to drive and get it, and the gas money, and then the work that it took to like haul it into the livestock trailer. So if you find the right connections, you may be able to get your dirt, your compost, all those things for really good prices or free.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to people.
Yeah. And actually, even sometimes when there's building sites, you know, sometimes it takes quite a while. You know, they're digging the hole for the new house or a building. And if they're, you know, you might work with them, you can get that soil tested before you say, yeah, I'd like to take some of that. You know, you make an agreement. A lot of times they'll give it to you free because they have to pay to haul it off.
Right.
And so you might get some good soil. Just keep your eyes open on what you can do. Anne has the cotton mill there.
Yeah.
And so cotton mill seed is something that you can add into your soil that can be real good. We have breweries, you know, those small breweries, and you can get that spent grain that you can add into your compost and into your raised beds.
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. There's a
And
lot
also with wood chips too, don't a lot of the tree companies, I mean, they have to haul all that stuff off, and most of the time they will chip it up in their chipper and they will dump it in your backyard so they don't have to pay for it. So that's a free way to get that.
Yeah, there's chip drops you can do online. I think Carmen said that one time she would actually drive when she was watching them tear down trees along the highway. She would actually pull off and be like, "Hey, what are you doing with these trees? Are you like chipping them up or something?" And they're like, "Yeah, we
put it in the Google Translator too."
She went over there and she was like, "Hey, I need this stuff." And she went back. She was putting it in the back of her minivan. And she was like, "I'm going to get it if it's free." But she said, you know, you have to, I think that's the hard part for us nowadays though, is that we're so afraid to open up our mouth and ask people.
That's true.
And, you know, part of being a homesteader is maybe coming out of your shell a little bit and trying new things. And, you know, more than just the physical cost, you know, the actual paper money cost, there's a little bit of a mental cost to homesteading. And some of that is when you really do gain independence as a homesteader and you're learning how to do things, you're increasing your skills, but you're also getting out of your comfort zone sometimes. I mean, you really do. We were just encouraging this man, you know, if you want to be able to take vacation as a homesteader as a gardener, as a person that's raising their own food,
That's right.
if you have animals or if you have fruit trees or vegetable gardens, you've got to figure out how you're going to vacation. You've got to open your mouth sometimes and talk to people. Even Sandi was saying, you got to maybe find some other homesteaders and you
Yeah.
find people that can help take care of your property while you are away, or you won't be the one getting a vacation, or you won't be going
Well, I
away
mean,
to these
That's
meetups.
the cost of your mental well-being also
Yeah.
is going into that. And we've talked about starting up the garden now. One thing that I don't think a lot of us think of is how much water does it take, because not all of us are on my last farm. I was on well water, so my well pump, it was $50 a month, regardless whether I was gardening for the summer or whether I was just living my best life in the scary tub that Monica got scared of. My water was the same. Here we are on city water, and that costs a little bit more money. So you need to work that into your budget. You've
Right.
put this money into your garden now, whether you've found free stuff that you've done or you've purchased or whatever you've done, you have your garden now. Okay. What is the next step, Sandi? Now we're looking into plant starts and waters, right? For
Right.
continuing your garden. Huh?
Yeah, because the cost of city water is going up all the time.
Right.
Depending on where you live, you can harvest the rainwater off of your buildings.
Yes.
Where I live, you can. And our city actually had a thing where you could buy the rain barrels from them for $50. It was a great deal. I have 5 of them.
That's awesome.
And so then you can run hoses to your different gardens. But everything that has a roof, because outbuildings are gold to me, why not save all the water off of there? I'm doing a project this summer because on my food forest, it is a very steep hill. I have hoses that go up to there, but I have a fence that goes all the way around. So I'm doing this flashing with gutter system, and I'm going to collect the rainwater off of that would just run probably into the neighbor's yard because it's at the fence layer. And I can use that in my food forest because
Awesome.
you have to look at water as a premium thing.
Yes.
Because
Right.
who knows when there might be restrictions on your water. And when you're figuring the cost of your garden, you have to say, okay, what can I do to use the resources, the rain that's right there, and has a creek right by her?
Yes, we do.
Can she use that? Is it legal for her to take water from there? You have to know what your county will let you do or your city. But even if you have to put great big tubs out every time it rains and then just scoop it out, do what you have to do to make your homestead cost effective and successful.
And this is why I love listening to Sandi, because as she's talking, I'm over here with my little notepad, because that's one thing I didn't even think of was rain catchment. The one issue I had, and we talked about it on a podcast, how I had issues when we had the hurricane and our electricity was out and our well didn't run.
Yeah.
I was out of water. You would think I'd be like, yes, that's the first thing I need to think of is the rain catchment system. But I didn't. So that's why it's important when you're listening to our podcast, have a little notebook by you. Just in case if you hear one of the 4 of us say something, you're like, ooh, that's a good idea. You can just jot it down for later.
We have videos. Go ahead.
I was soapboxing right there of why I'm listening to Sandi. I'm like, rain catchment. That's it. And I started.
Well, Casey's having an issue right now with the bedding in his chicken area because of all the rain.
Right.
So what can he do to catch that water instead of it letting it go into that run? And what kind of initial investment he may have to put into it that, one, it helps his chickens so that their feet aren't wet all the time and the chickens aren't going to get dirty all the time. What can he do to catch that water instead of having it spread all over his property? You have to think about things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For instance, our water bill this past month was $32. That's how much our county water is, usually somewhere between 32 and 42. But in the summer, it doubles and triples because we're watering the garden. So
Mhm.
what we're going to do, we're going to have a project as well to have a pump from the creek to be able to water our garden. And that's a big deal, but we
Yeah.
are working toward that to be able to minimize the expense of being and potentially being more self-sufficient. What if the water gets cut off or something like
Mhm.
that?
Yeah. Well, now I'm over here trying to text Eric asking him what the cost would be to put gutters to our barn and to my greenhouse because
Yeah.
we have videos on water catchment. We install big giant water catchment systems on both sides of our house. We kind of because we do live in a community, not in a community, but the back edge of it. We're really mindful of keeping these systems off to the side of our house. And then we pump from those big systems, the 2 water catchment areas of our house, the main areas that come down and they go into it. We have 2 of them, and we actually will pump the water from those to the 4 big system piece. We have 4 of them, 2 of them stacked on top of another, 4 of them over right next to my garden. And we have them sitting right there out in the open, right next to my garden. And what we do is we fill those up as the other ones on the side of our house become full. We pump the water out, we fill them up, and we actually have a spigot. Eric installed a spigot so we can turn the water on. Now it's a gravity fed system, so it doesn't come out as fast as I would like it to, but it's always a work in progress.
That's right.
And it does water my garden. It's a little bit of a little time consuming, but
Mhm.
it's a great way for us to catch the amount of water that we would use in an entire gardening season. I'm able to get away with gardening and using that water for I went almost an entire season with those 6 big giant, I think they're 750 gallon rain barrel, like the big water barrel, like they're used
Mhm.
for something else. It was food grade. We got them for $50 a piece about
Okay.
4 years ago, right before COVID. We got a bunch of them for cheap. And I will tell you what, that is the best thing for me. Now I'm in the mindset here thinking, how can I catch the water off of our barn? Because we have this big barn that the water just
Right.
spills off the edges of. And now I'm thinking, what would the cost be to put rain gutters there to catch that water and to be able to collect even just 3 more or 4 more barrels or those big, because that water is amazingly helpful in the Texas heat. And because we water a lot, our garden gets it gets so dry here in the summer. And there are times where we go for 60, 70 days with no rain. I mean, no rain at all. And I will go through my rainwater barrels because
Mhm.
I can't have a water bill that's $300 or $400. I just can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like brainstorming how to put rain gutters on all this stuff.
Well, that's something else that we discussed as far as vacations. I have a time in the end of August that I'm hoping to be able to leave my homestead. But it's important, according to my friends here, that I reach out and make some more connections. I do have a neighbor that lives here that would be glad to look after the chickens, but they've got their own garden. They're not going to look after the garden. And that's when a lot of things are coming off on the vines. And I blatantly said to another person that was going, well, I'm not going to grow a garden this year because when everything comes off is when we're supposed to be gone. And I said, well, I'll just get my daughter to come and live here for about a week. And they said, isn't your daughter going with you? I went, oh, yeah, she is. Well, there went that plan. So, but that is something that we do as far as building a community, finding friends, kids and grandkids, and who might be in the area to be able to come over to install timers. Sandy, we were talking about
Mhm.
timers.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, to be able to have timers to go to water the garden. I think that's the route we're going to go, and have our person that comes over and looks after the chickens kind of just take a look to make sure that the timer doesn't stay on 24/7, but that kind of thing. So is anybody else going on a trip that they would like to be able to leave their homestead? Monica?
We're
Yeah, Sandy?
we're only usually gone in the summertime a few days at a time, and so we do have timers. But
Mhm.
I have a friend that honestly, she doesn't have very much money. Seriously, her garden is so important to her, right?
Yes.
And she literally will put um, plastic garbage cans out into her gardens to collect rain. She'll put stuff on the patio to collect rain, and she'll fill up her garbage cans so that she'll literally scoop
Wow.
around plants,
Mhm.
We do
because
that.
you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, um, it's still that theory of, if you want to survive, you got to be willing to pick up sticks.
Yeah.
And that's just a theory that I have lived my life with, that if
Mhm.
you're willing, you have to be willing to do the little things that nobody else will do to make yourself successful.
That's right.
And in
Yeah.
the garden, sometimes it's as simple as picking up sticks. That's a whole metaphor of what
Oh,
you
sure.
do.
Yeah.
um but if it's putting out buckets to catch the rain so you can fill up
Mhm.
your garbage cans to water, because there's restrictions and they won't let you hardly water your garden, and it's 100 degrees every day,
Right.
be willing to do those things to save the cost
Yeah.
and to have success in your garden.
We
So
have buckets out. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, you're good.
We have buckets out to catch rainwater as well. And for a while, because we don't have trash pickup here in our outside of the city limit
Mhm.
area, we have to go to recycling center. And Worth was coming home with all kinds of things. People, especially when he first retired, I said, "You're not allowed to go to the trash dump anymore because you're coming home with a car full of stuff." But we have used it, and it's been
Mhm.
other people's buckets that they had something in that is not toxic, and pieces of wood and all kinds of things that you
Yep.
just find treasures just about anywhere.
Yeah.
If you want food grade buckets, the easiest place to go is to the bakeries in box stores.
Yep.
Albertsons, Safeway, Walmart, they get frosting in these big buckets.
Mhm.
They throw them away,
Oh,
and I can't even tell you how many buckets I have from them.
Well, you can also get we go to there's one if you go to the franchises, a lot of these fast food places, they get their pickles in 5-gallon buckets.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
we've gotten and they don't always give them to you. Sometimes they can't give them away. So they'll say, I'll sell them to you for $1 each or whatever. And I've gotten 5-gallon buckets for $1 a piece. They smell like pickles, but I'm okay with that because I like pickles. And
absolutely.
it's food grade. And I'm just gonna put feed. I was using those buckets to ferment my feed for my animals over the
Mhm.
summertime last year.
Right.
And that was worth the $5 that I paid for 5 buckets, because normally those food grade 5-gallon buckets, if you're going to the Home Depot or you're buying them online, they're going to cost you a lot more than $1. They're going to cost you they're going to cost you like $8 or more, depending on where you get them from and how many you need or whatever it is. But that's the thing too. I think it's important to be able to kind of plan ahead. That's been a big deal for us this year. We're talking about going on vacation and whether or not Eric can go. And mentally, it's hard because I want him to be able to go, and I don't want him to not be able to have a family vacation with us. But in his brain, he's like, I can leave the animals because I can have X, Y, and Z take care of them. Like Miss Ann was saying, I can have someone come over and do the animals. It's just a matter of checking in. But what about the garden? I don't have people. My dad and my in-laws, they're not going to sit out there for hours and pick, garden food. So
Yeah.
one of the things we instituted a few years ago, because in July and August, we get this intense sunlight. My garden is right there under full sun. I don't have any shade in my garden. It is full sun. We started putting up shade cloth. It was 100% worth the investment to be able to have the shade cloth to put up, because now we've got enough shade to keep our garden going through the summer, and those plants are not dying. So
Right.
I'm able to get a second return on those plants. I'm able to get a fall harvest without replanting or staggering my planting. And so now in my brain, I'm like, okay, how can I plant my garden now to make sure that it's going to be harvestable? Yeah. It's going to be harvestable in May and June or early July, so that at the end of the month or whenever we decide we're going to go on vacation, all of my big things, all of my things that I need to make sure are pulled, that I want to can, that I want to take care of, they're already being harvested, and I'm not going to suffer a big loss if
Right.
they don't harvested. Or if invite my friends to come over and say, I need you to come into the garden. I need you to pull out a bunch of fruit so it keeps growing. I need you to harvest for me. And what a blessing that can be to someone else for you to say, I have this big space and I have all these buckets or all this fruit. Can you please come take it for a week? I mean, I don't see a problem with that. But you have to kind of plan ahead and be ready for those things. And mentally, it can be hard. If you never get a vacation as a homesteader or as a person that's raising your own food, that can be a really hard thing. And you have to think about it a little ahead of time, but plan for it. But it can be done. You just need to plan ahead and do what you need to do to get there. But yeah, I think that's a hard thing sometimes for people. It really, it's a difficult task to be able to plan those things out. At least for me, it's been harder to plan it out way ahead of time like that.
That's right. That's right.
Well, also, you're talking about food grade buckets and all that kind of stuff. Another part of your garden that we could probably talk about on another episode, if you want to hear more about, because listen, we could talk about money and homesteading until the cows come home, literally. No pun back to Monica and Eric, but we could. But is your canning stuff, because you're going to reuse. I mean, we're talking about reusing these food grade buckets to catch water. You also got to put money into what you're going to use to preserve your food in. So if you want to hear an episode on that, leave us a comment down below, because we are at our 30-minute time. You know, we try to keep it around 30, 35 minutes if we're feeling spicy. On the podcast, but don't worry, because if you want to hear more, you need to come tomorrow, Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we have our live, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about kind of the breakdown of how much you spend on gardening and cost of running your homestead for money and more. So come in, give us a good old thumbs up, tell us your thoughts. How do you save money on your homestead? How do you plan it? We really appreciate you coming in and joining us for this 2-part series. It's been a really cool topic to kind of sit down and listen to my wonderful co-host give me ideas. So we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We will see you next Tuesday. And until then, bye, y'all. Bye. We'll see you next podcast.
Bye.
Are you enjoying our Hay Bale topics? To learn more, click our LinkTree link to get all our product recommendations along with discount codes and more.